we just ran a half marathon.
Yeah. Awesome. So today I'm having a chat after half marathon.
Yes.
With Dan Price.
We're looking very fresh, aren't we?
How you doing, Dan?
Mate, I'm really well. Thanks for having me. I'm really grateful to have met you and been able to be a part of the project. Like, it's amazing what you're doing, mate. I know I said it before off camera, but mate, it's really inspiring what you're doing. You know, you should be really proud of yourself for using your gift of, you know, athleticism and your drive and resilience and your own personal story to connect with the community and have these conversations, which are the biggest part. You know, the running is incredible, but the running is like the spotlight that then allows you to, you know, gives you the microphone to then share the stories, which is
thanks,
you know,
mate.
what's the really important part. So, mate, I'm just very glad to be a part of it.
Cheers. I'm supposed to big you up first, not the other way around. So I came across Dan last year, and it was a number of different things. I'd seen that you were an ambassador for a few mental health charities. We were both running the 60k for Movember at the time. You were also running with the 440 at the time, so it was a load of different things, and so I thought, I've got to reach out to this bloke and have a chat. And I was also, I think at the time there were a couple of things that I was asking you for advice on. So we were trying to do an Are You OK Day at work, and I was reaching out, and then I do remember that, actually. And I was also asking you some things about different charities as well. Yes. And this was probably before I started to speak to and work with Gotcha for Life as well. Yeah, I do remember. Yep. And actually it wasn't until a few months after we first connected that I first heard your story. Yeah, okay. And after reading your story, I then went and listened to a couple of podcasts you'd done, and I was just completely blown away by your openness. And so it was then a case of, right, I need to meet this guy. And it's only taken us 6 months, but yeah, well, we've been pretty connected the last couple of months. Yeah. But yeah, that's the beauty of technology and social media these days. But yeah, it's nice to. So this is the first time we've actually caught up in person and gone for a run. Audience. Yeah. So, would you mind just jumping in and telling the story that I suppose I read and was blown away with? Sure. Yeah, look, obviously I'll try and do it fairly quickly for the recording today. You know, sometimes I speak for 45 minutes or so, but you know, the important parts of my journey with mental health is that I only realised, you know, in my healing from some pretty substantial mental health challenges at sort of 29, 30 years old, that my mental health journey started when I was 7, as you would have heard on one of the podcasts, and it's something that when I first started sharing my story I hadn't connected with yet. Yeah. So it's something that I've only started sharing in the last probably 18 months, because I've realised how important it was. I've been diagnosed with ADHD at 7, which is a mental health condition by definition. But I was put on medication, and that whole experience, not only for having the diagnosis and the kind of label stuck on me as a youngster, but then not being not having it explained to me in the way that I could really understand. I just felt like I was shipped off to doctors and all these tests were done, and you know, it was kind of like, yep, what we thought was wrong with you is wrong with you. Take these pills and you'll be a normal kid. That's what I heard. That was my experience. Yeah. Mate, and to be honest, it still upsets me thinking about it now, because I felt so different. I didn't feel normal. I felt medicated, like I was obviously, but you know, I was picked on. I was treated differently by my peers and my teachers, which was very tough. You know, and I wasn't a naughty kid. I was hyperactive, and that was pretty much it. Never did anything never did anything very bad. You know, I was never in trouble for, you know, hurting people or abusing people or, you know, getting in trouble with the law. It wasn't like that. It was just I didn't like being inside. Yeah. Get me outside and play sport, you know. And but you know, it was a really important part of my journey to start speaking about, because what I realised is way back then at 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, I practiced this really toxic behaviour of silencing my own feelings and pain and hiding them. I never ever told my parents until I was 29, 30 years old. They never knew how picked on and bullied I was by other people at school. They never knew that I was a victim of bullying. And that happened again in high school. I went to an all-boys boarding school, and I kind of relived that whole, you're the youngest in the school, everyone's getting to know you. Why are you going to the nurse's station and taking medication every 4 hours? And I wasn't the only one, I'm sure, but for me, I felt like I was the only one. And so by year 8, it might have been year 9, but fairly early on at Joey's, I decided not to take the medication anymore, and that was then a pretty toxic relationship that I started to form with doctors. Taking medication or pills for anything for headaches. I still have trouble with it. Even though I do take medication today. I've had a medication journey of being on and off various medications for mental health. Right now, today, I'm taking an antidepressant and I'm okay with that, but it's still a challenge. But the behaviour was the important part of that early part of my story. Through high school, I really sort of struggled with my identity because I was kind of, especially in primary school, I'd be picked first in for the dodgeball team or the touch footy team, but no one wanted to sit next to me in class because I was a fidgeter and they'd get me in trouble. So I had this real identity crisis going on, and that really, I don't know, it gained a lot of momentum in my late teens. I think around the pressure of needing to perform and be a perfectionist at school, I certainly started to have this need for external gratification to know that I was good enough, from especially my dad, but also from coaches, teachers, girls, so I'd do crazy things to get attention, but mainly overperforming and overachieving. I worked really hard, and I kind of burnt myself out at the end of school, working too hard, studying around the clock, cramming, got into the uni course I wanted, and I was a high performer. I got a scholarship through uni to work at a firm, and I was then promoted, and I was just rushing through life trying to do everything and be the best. And I married my high school sweetheart at 23. I bought a house at 25, and I'm just ticking these boxes. I need to do all this stuff, and I need to get all this stuff so everyone thinks I'm good. And when people said, "Oh, Dan, well done, you've got a house, you're amazing," I was like, "Oh, I'm amazing." I believed them. Because I didn't believe it within myself, and this was the problem. And I never believed that I was good enough, because from when I was a kid, I felt different, and I need medication to be normal. Like that, it was just in there. It was really toxic. I also didn't really have any I would say stress management skills, but also knowing how to sort of deal with conflict. Like I had quite a calm family life that I never saw or heard my parents arguing or anything like that, and it became an issue because I did the same thing. Like if I had an argument in my relationship, I'd just be quiet, and I'd just do that silent thing, and I didn't know how to connect with my emotions, I guess is the point. And again, it was really toxic thing for me to be practicing and reinforcing all the time, because it was, by the time I started to struggle mentally, by about, I think I was 27 by this point, so paint the picture, as I explained, I had all the things that I thought I needed. I was the youngest associate director of this big international firm, and I'm making big money, and my friends are like, "Dan, you're the best," and, it's all that fluff, and it was all this external, this material things, all these things outside of myself that I thought I needed, and these attachments to make myself feel good. And it all meant nothing, mate, because I was severely depressed by about 27, 28 years old. My marriage wasn't going well. I was 2 years or 3 years into a marriage, in marriage counselling, trying to save it. And I felt like a failure. I couldn't fix it. I think I knew that it was done. It was really hard. I moved home to my parents' place at 28 after moving out at 20. And this isn't an uncommon story for for anyone to go through. You know, marriages break down, people get married young all the time, but it's something that you have to talk about. Like, there's no way that anyone goes through a divorce at any time, or any breakup, any relationship breakup, at any point in their life, and is okay and doesn't need to talk about it.
Yeah.
I call bullshit on that every time. No one's fine, you know? But I was fine. Mate, I was awesome at convincing myself and everyone that I was fine, and that was the problem. You know, this toxic masculinity that we talk about, this, you know, reinforcement, you know, this armour that I had to wear, that I didn't want to admit that there was something wrong, that I was struggling, that I felt like a failure, that I felt down. I moved home to my parents' place, as I mentioned, you know, and I'd moved out home at 20. I felt like a complete failure. Like, I hadn't lost everything, but I felt like I had, including myself. I still had a great job. You know, I still had my family and friends. Like, I was living at my parents' place. No one thought I was a bad person, but I did for some reason. I thought I was a failure. And I couldn't handle failure. You know, I was the perfect guy. I needed to win and be the best. And the problem was, I never spoke about it.
Yeah.
I started telling everyone I was fine, started drinking and acting out when it was something that wasn't really normal to me. I stopped doing the things that I loved as much, you know, the gym and that sort of thing. And I was going through these extremes of essentially burning the candle at both ends, or, you know, multiple candles were burning, as I mentioned on the run.
Yeah.
You know, I was trying to be the best at work. You know, I was keeping extremely busy, so I didn't have time to think and feel, essentially. Yeah. I was up at 5, I'd train, I'd go to work, I'd work a 12 or 14 hour day instead of an 8 or 9 hour day. I'd come home, I'd eat, I'd go to bed, I'd do it again, and then on the weekends I'd party. And I was just around the clock, busy, no time to think, no time to feel, everything's fine, convincing myself it's fine. And you can do that for a period of time, and we all know where that road leads. And it led to a really ugly downward spiral of depression and anxiety. You know, it was anxiety first. I was struggling with social anxiety. You know, I'd lost all self-confidence to the point where I'd leave social functions very early. I had full-blown social anxiety. I'd have to stand against the wall. I thought people were talking about me. Yeah. You know, it felt a little bit like paranoia, but it wasn't paranoia. That's kind of how it presents. Yeah. You know, your mind starts thinking, you know, you've lost so much confidence in yourself, and you are so anxious, struggling with panic, and your senses are so heightened, and your mind is racing all the time and telling you these crazy storylines, you know, and I don't say crazy lightly either. Like, you do feel like you're losing your marbles, and you kind of are. Yeah. You know, these storylines that aren't true, and your mind then creates this whole motion picture about this tiny little thought that wasn't even true. And that's, for me, where the panic would come from. These thoughts would be overwhelming, and then it would become a physical sensation. You know, I didn't know what it was at the time, as I mentioned before on the run. I just thought I was sick. You know, I was having full body sweats and vomiting sometimes, and, you know, panicking in the office, and, you know, sometimes I'd be on the floor thinking I was having a heart attack. Like, it's very, very scary. I wouldn't wish them upon anyone. Yeah. And I know you've experienced them too. They're very scary. You know, but I wasn't doing anything to help myself either. I was just working harder. I was still drinking a lot. I wasn't sleeping well. You know, and it got to a crisis point, you know, pretty quickly, but it then took a while to culminate in, you know, really acting out on those thoughts of self-harm and suicide. I'd been struggling with suicidal thoughts for probably, I'd say 3 months, quite scarily, and I was pretty worried by that point, but I think I'd been unwell mentally for too long. You know, I'd been unwell by this point for probably, I'd say, 9 or 12 months of being pretty depressed, you know, like struggling to get out of bed, lost my mojo for life, doing deals at work where I was, you know, banking pretty big commission checks weren't giving me any buzz anymore. You know, it was kind of like my ability to feel anything good had been capped at a very low point of like, oh, yeah, it sort of felt good. Yeah. You know, there was no real, like, yeah, awesome. There was no high-fiving in the office. The gym wasn't giving me much buzz anymore. Running had sort of lost its buzz, you know, and there are scientific reasons for all of that. Yeah. Mentally, with the brain chemistry, and you know, I really needed help. I needed to share what I was going through. By that point, you know, I needed time out of work and away from the stresses of life. I was going through you know, a divorce that was with lawyers, and it was very stressful, and you know, pretty unpleasant. You know, and again, I just wasn't talking about it. And you know, I got to the point where I felt really ashamed of how I was feeling. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. I hated who I was. You know, at this point, I still had a job. I was having quite a few sick days, but not to the point where people were asking too many questions. They just thought, oh, he's going through a divorce, you know, he's blowing off some steam, that whole thing. And yeah, look, just to paint the picture for people who haven't heard my story, you know, it got to the point where I was isolating so much. I was lying to my family, telling them that I was staying with a friend, and I was telling that friend I was staying with my family, and I was sleeping in my car quite a lot. Not every day, like I wasn't like homeless, but you know, I had a lot of stuff in the boot, and because I worked in the city in a big office building, I had change rooms and I had a gym membership, so I'd literally quite often drink myself to sleep in my car, to try and take the edge off the anxiety, and you know, quieten the suicidal thoughts, and then I'd wake up and go have a shower and go to work. And on the 4th of December 2014, it was another one of those nights. I'd been out with some friends, left early. By this point, they'd nicknamed me the Ghost because I always used to disappear. You know, and it's pretty much like they'd pretty much nicknamed my anxiety. You know, which is kind of, you know, sad in hindsight. You know, but I was pretty good at putting on the mask and convincing people I was fine, including myself. And you know, unfortunately, you know, people aren't that in tune with what other people are going through, which is why we have these conversations, right? To really see the warning signs. You know, that was a joke where it actually was really something serious, and that's not anyone's fault. But we can all do better, and you know, it's one of the reasons why I share my story. Yeah, look, I spent the night in my car. I didn't sleep. I was in tears most of the night. I was really struggling to work out how I'd live through another day. Deeply suicidal, and I remember the clock ticking over to 5 a.m. I was pretty content on acting on those thoughts that morning. I just didn't feel I could go on any longer, and I tried to write a note on a piece of paper out of the glove box of my car. I didn't know what to write, and you know, it's funny thinking back now. I don't know how conscious it was. I knew what was happening. But I don't think I ever said to myself, "You're about to kill yourself, Dan." You know, it's just kind of innate. I was almost on autopilot, being driven by something else, like being just urged to turn it off. I just wanted the pain to stop. I was so broken and exhausted, and life had become so hard every day that I'd gotten to a point where I couldn't go on, and my mind was also telling me that the people that knew me were better off without me, which is sadly a very common thing that you hear. You feel like you're a complete burden on the world, and you're a waste of space. You know, you're not worthy of being here any longer. That complete worthlessness, hopelessness. Look, I walked up to the Harbour Bridge in the rocks. It was only a couple of minutes stroll from my office, which was down on the end of George Street at Circular Quay, and climbed up on the outside of the Harbour Bridge, and I tightrope walked a railing on the other side of the fence that's about 3 inches wide for 400 metres in a suit and work shoes. Police don't even know how I survived that. You know, I didn't care if I fell or not. That in itself, you know, I know that I had some sort of guardian angel. I'm not religious in that way, but something kept me here that morning. Because it doesn't make sense. I sat down on the railing and I was there to take my life. You know, and in those final moments, you know, I was about to jump. I heard sirens, and it all happened very quickly. I went into panic pretty quickly. Before I knew it, there was a police officer on the fence urging me not to jump. I think the Harbour Bridge security had seen me and called the police without approaching me, which I'm very thankful for, because it really did take someone trained and able to connect with someone who was at first very content on not being here. Aaron Trevitt, who saved my life through talking to me that morning, he said that he'd never seen anyone so broken. He felt like he looked straight through me. I tried to tell him that to leave me alone, that I was there to watch the sunrise. I tried to convince him that there was nothing to worry about at first, which goes to show how unwell I was.
Yeah.
And also how ingrained in me that make an excuse, don't let anyone in scenario was, right? Like I'm literally dangling from a railing on the outside of Harbour Bridge, trying to convince a police officer that I'm okay.
Yeah.
Literally, like it's in the police report. It's bizarre. And just an insight into how unwell the mind is at this point. It's not thinking rationally at all. I'd taken my watch off and left it there for my little brother. Like I thought that was going to help him grieve my loss. These things that I was thinking were just so bizarre, but not uncommon. And mate, look, the important part of the story is he was able to convince me. Not even convince me, just plant the seed for me to see that there was something to live for. He told me that it was going to be okay. He could get me help. He explained to me that there was a lot of help out there for me and he could take me straight there. That I was going to be safe. That, my family and friends would be okay because he'd seen a lot of people get through where I was. And, I believed him. That's the long and short of it is I was vulnerable and exposed for the first time in my life in a really big way. But by far and away, I felt like I was just wide open, like my chest was open and someone was just peering inside me, and he held me, and he was like, it's going to be okay. And he was physically holding me too. It was quite a powerful moment, and by that point I had 5 police officers reaching through the fence holding my clothes, because they weren't sure that I wasn't going to jump. And once I told them to get me down, the sun was just coming up. The traffic was stopped, and I started to become quite paranoid that I was going to be on the news. And I was like, get me down from here. I don't want people to know. And, again, I think it's important to tell, because although someone knew and these police officers knew, I still didn't want anyone else to know, what was happening. And this stigma and shame was so strong. I got taken to hospital under the Mental Health Act to the psych ward at Vinnie's. And, the police officer said to me after a while, being processed and, this padded cell, this very, very full-on scenario, no shoelaces, no belt, like the whole bit, keep me safe. Police guard. If the police weren't there, I would have run. I was so scared. I was calm, they didn't have to sedate me or anything like that. I was very happy to be there, but also very scared. And then Aaron said to me, we're going to need to get your family, or advise your family. And I begged them not to. And they're like, mate, it's going to happen. You're scheduled under the Mental Health Act. We're going to, it's part of the process. You might want to do it yourself if you're feeling up to it, because, later you might be the one, you might want to have been the one. And, I called my dad, which was, at the time, the person that I wanted to know the least, because I've let my dad down in this whole thing of being a kid and wanting to make him proud. And, I remember him saying to me, Dan, it's okay, mate. Everything's going to be fine. I'll be there in 20 minutes. And it still chokes me up, and, mate, that was, that was really the start of my healing. I spent nearly a month in hospital. To get well, I went through a big medication journey, a lot of psychology and psychiatry. But I remember saying to my first psychiatrist in the PEC unit of Vinnie's, surrounded by a lot of very unwell people. It's not a nice place. I was there for a couple of days scheduled until they discharged me, and then I went into a private rehabilitation of elected rehabilitation that was advised. But I remember saying to this first psychiatrist, first doctor I'd probably seen of that nature since I was 7, 8 years old. I said to him, mate, you just need to help me. I never want to be there again. You need to help me. And I just completely handed it over. I'd tried to do it on my own for 12, 18 months, and I failed miserably, because you can't keep yourself safe and alive when you're depressed like that. When you're in a serious state of depression, you need help. You can't do it on your own. You need community. You need to share it. You need to put your head up. It's like when you're drowning out the back of the surf. It's a very simple analogy. When the surf's 10 foot and you're out the back, and you're literally going under and taking on water, you need to put your hand up. That's why you do that. That's why the lifeguards are there. And there's lifeguards everywhere in the mental health space. Yeah. GPs, family, friends, psychologists, psychiatrists, mental health boards, yoga, meditation, healthy diet. You know, like there's a whole range of lifeguards out there in the form of self-care. And I was just like, give it to me, you know. And I was glad that I had that go-getter, real like hungry, determined attitude that had served me in other parts of my life, because I just threw myself at wellness. And even though I wanted to be perfect at being well, it's by no means been a easy road. You know, I've had struggles since. You know, there have been times when I haven't looked after myself, when I've acted out, you know, drunk too much, or, you know, I try not to drink at all these days. But, you know, there have been a lot of poor decisions made and a lot of lessons learned, which you need to, you know. And last year, as I mentioned to you, at the end of last year, I had some time off work, and now back on medication for the first time in, you know, probably, I think I've been off medication for 2.5 years, and I never thought I'd be back on it. And that was a tough journey to go back onto an antidepressant, but I'd had some things going in my personal life that were challenging. I'd gone through some grief, and I hadn't dealt with it well, because I was looking after everyone else and being Mr. Perfect, and it sort of came crashing down pretty quickly, and I knew I needed to reach out for help. I needed to ask my workplace for some time off work, and I did all those things pretty quickly. And that's what I hope, I think, from sharing my story. As we said before, you know, I remember you asked me, why do you share your story? What's one of the biggest things you want people to get out of it? And I think, you know, for people to find hope in my story, but to see themselves or someone they know somewhere along that journey that I share, which is a big one. And I feel like I didn't go through everything, but I went through quite a lot, and it happened in pretty clear stages. You know, the ramp up of, you know, self-medication or self-harm, you know, the anxiety and panic attacks, the depression, you know, and then obviously the suicidality and the attempt, you know, and then hospital and all that stuff. Like, there's a journey there, and I hope people find themselves somewhere along my journey and get early intervention before crisis point. You don't need to get to crisis point. You don't need to hit rock bottom. You don't even have to be really depressed to get help. You can just, you know, you've lost your job, you're having a hard time in your relationship, like, get help then, because those are things that if you bury and don't get help for, they'll come up somewhere else later, because it's happened to me.
And so the biggest thing, and thanks so much for sharing that story, mate, and being so open.
You're welcome. I nearly lost it there at one point. It's always, mate, it just goes to show how important that relationship with my dad is for me. It chokes me up almost every time. Sometimes I just park it. I just don't actually quite say that bit about the phone call, because I remember how I felt. I thought my dad was going to disown me. Right? This is what my mind's telling me. You know, I'm 30 minutes or probably 60 minutes post being rescued from trying to take my life. I'm in a really, really broken, vulnerable, don't know what's going on position. You know, it's a big moment. But anyway,
right, it's such a powerful story, and I know when we were on the run, we were talking about it. We're also, you know, one of the first things I asked you afterwards was, how long did it take you to share that story and to come to terms with it? And you said, I think it was 18 months.
Yeah, 18 months it was.
And I suppose we were also discussing about how you're at a point now where you feel really sort of comfortable in yourself and the choices you've made and the decisions and where you are now, and you actually look back on it as a, well, I don't want to take the words out of your mouth. How do you look back on that now? Well, 6 years later, isn't it?
5 and a bit years later. I'd certainly look back on it now with a lot of gratitude, but it's taken a long time to get there. But with real acceptance, I think I said to you, you know, I don't live with regrets, and it's not a throwaway line. It's a real, I've wanted to look at those things that something inside me, my mind, my soul, something there, societal conditioning wants me to feel bad about some of those things, something, the way I've been brought up, whatever it is. And I've really challenged why that is and worked through reframing that and letting go what I need to around that, because I don't want to feel ashamed or bad about, that my marriage broke down.
Yeah. Because
I shouldn't. Two people grow apart, it didn't work out. That I tried to take my life is obviously the biggest one. There's a lot of shame and guilt around that, and it's still there sometimes. Yeah. But it's fleeting, and it doesn't sit with me and make me feel heavy, like it used to in the early times. Look, I guess to answer the question a bit further, I feel very grateful because I've been able to use my experience to grow myself, to bring my family together, to help my family heal from not just that experience but other things too, because we're a lot more open now. My relationships are a lot deeper, but there's more trust there too, I think. And it doesn't have to be deep, like we said before. We still have a laugh. We still, I still have a lot of banter. I don't talk about this stuff all the time. I don't, get really deep and spiritual all the time, because it doesn't need to be. Life doesn't need to be too serious. I've certainly had moments where I've gone a bit too far that way, because I've read a few too many spiritual books, and and you get a little bit, I want to go live in India or something. But finding that balance and just using my experiences for good, because it makes me feel good. It's good for me. It's as good for me as it is for the person that it helps. Like I shared a message with you this morning on Instagram, just because it was a special moment for me. I was really excited about our catch up today and our run, because I'm very inspired about what you're doing and how much community you have around it. And a guy had reached out to me saying that he'd listened to one of my podcasts and he was in tears, and it's brought him hope around getting out of his depression. And those messages remind me of how powerful my story is, but so many people's stories, your story, everyone's story, that's sharing their stories of struggling in life, resilience, growing through it, and getting on with life, and honouring the good days and honouring the bad days and everything in between. Really valuing relationships and family and health holistically. All these really important things. And you can have a nice car and a nice house as long as it doesn't define who you are. And those things. Look, I just think storytelling is just such a powerful tool, and I'm just glad that my story has helped people and has brought people hope. Every time I share it, it helps me. It always does in some way, shape or form, whether it's just that I've connected with someone that has reached out to me or wants to interview me or what have you, or whether sometimes sharing my story I have little moments of and I'll have some sort of realization, like I did about 12 months ago around the very start of my journey. It's always growing me and helping me at the same time. And like I said on the run, like I'm not some master, and I just think that I'm just giving back to the world and I'm this great person. I do it because I need to, and I think it's the right thing to do. I think I went through what I went through for a reason. I did sort of survive against the odds, really. And not many people get through what I went through. And for that reason alone, I think it's almost my job to share, because I can be a voice to a lot of people who sadly didn't make it.
I definitely have seen that on the different charities that you're working with, through sharing your story, the feedback, and I suppose the response to it as well. So
always it blows me away, and it still perplexes me sometimes. That and there's obviously always that thing, that little bit of self-doubt and what have you in sharing it. I get nervous sometimes, but look, it's just it's a really nice way to connect with people too. And I've lost the real the fear of what people are going to think of me, because I'm like, mate, come on, you get up on stage or on the radio or whatever and tell people your darkest moments. You know, you shouldn't really worry about what people think of you, because you've just gone out there. But you know, I think it's also important to share that I've never been judged for sharing my story. I've never had people say,
it's important.
You know, oh, you're weak, you know, you're a pussy, like whatever it is. Like, you know, all these things in my head that I think I've never had that. Like, I've had a couple of, you know, negative comments over the years on social media stuff, but you're always going to get those, and you can tell that the people are in pain, and it's okay. That's fine, you know, out of however many thousands there have been. But look, you know, I haven't been judged. I haven't lost friends or family. No one's turned their back on me, and I think it's important to say that for people who are struggling and fearing reaching out, because the people who love you and the people who care about you, they're going to be there, and they'll be there at the drop of a hat most of the time. And for those people who aren't as lucky as us to have an amazing support network and family, there's community out there in other ways. You know, there's community out there with charities like Gotcha for Life, and there's a number of them. That's why these charities, especially the grassroots community charities, are so important, because they provide community connection and hope and help and resilience, skills, upskilling, all that educational piece to people who don't have you know, the family network that we do. And I think you know, it's important for people to know that there's so much help and love and support out there. You know, I've gotten myself really well. You know, I love my life. I'm a father now. I've got another baby on the way. I've been able to make some really healthy lifestyle choices that have set me up to have the life I have today, and it hasn't taken me that long. Well, it didn't take me that long, you know. 12 or 18 months after my crisis point, I was feeling the best I'd ever felt in my entire life. Even though I was still volatile and still doing a lot of healing, I felt great. I'd made a lot of great decisions. I'd stopped drinking and partying. I'd left the job. I'd done some travel. I'd done a lot of therapy. I'd found meditation and yoga and some other holistic things, as well as taking my medication. And, you know, it didn't take like a lifetime, is my point. And I think it's, you know, it's important for people to know it's, although, you know, life is tough for all of us, you know, if you throw yourself at, you know, your wellness journey or, you know, your healing, it's amazing what breakthroughs and inroads you can make in a fairly short period of time. You know, and there's just so much help out there for all of us.
Awesome.
Yeah. I don't know, how have we gone on time, mate?
Really 40, that's fine. So, before we, I suppose, wrap up, I thought we'd finish, as you know, with those 5 fun questions, because as we said before, you do share your story. You do, and it's one with a lot of pain, but also a lot of hope, which I think is really important. And I really thank you for being so open about that. But I did want to finish on those fun questions, because, as you said, you're actually a really optimistic, fun-loving person.
I am.
So I wanted to finish on a high.
Sure, absolutely. That's good.
So we'll start with, you know, what's your favourite race?
My favourite running race?
Yeah.
The Movember, I don't know if I can say the Movember 60, because it wasn't really a race. Am I allowed to use that one?
Use whatever you want. There's no rules.
That one, Movember, the 60k run I did last year for Movember was the most special. I'd never run over 30. I'd just come out of my tough period of September, October. I needed community. I'd just connected with the 440. It was just about community connection. It was as much for me as it was for everyone else, and it just gave me so much hope. Yeah. It reminded me of how many people were around me, and it was so much fun, you know. And obviously for me to run that distance, you know, non-stop with, you know, a break, you know, a couple of minute break like an aid station, but you know, to run 60 k's in 6 odd hours, you know, with not much training, like, it just gave me so much, like, it reminded me of how strong I am, how resilient I am at a time when I really needed to remember, because I'd had the wind knocked out of my sails. And so fun, so inspiring for me personally. And so that's, there's more to come though.
Yeah, definitely. And do you listen to anything when you run?
Yeah, mostly not.
Yeah.
Mostly I love to really tune into myself.
Yeah.
I also don't like taking my phone.
Yeah.
So not normally. When I do, I'm a mixture of some old school tunes that give me a bit of nostalgia, or a good podcast like yourself.
Yeah.
I like to, but I'd say 80% of my runs are no headphones, no phone.
Cool.
Yeah.
And how many pairs of running shoes do you own? I know you just bought a new pair.
Yeah. Look, there's a few retired pairs now. There's only really 2 active pairs: my trail shoes and my Brooks trail shoes, and these new Hockers, which I'm really liking. But I'm a bit of a hoarder, so I've got about 10 pairs of shoes at home. My missus is like, "When are you going to throw these out?" Some of them stink.
Same. And now let me think. What's the next one?
Yeah, I can't
Shoes,
think.
and then it was biggest influence on your life so far.
Russell Brand.
Oh,
Russell Brand.
I understand that.
Yeah, amazing guy. If you haven't listened or heard something, very big mental health focus, huge mental health focus. Also, a lot about addiction, and not just the addiction that you'd think comes to mind around substance abuse, which he's lived and breathed, and I learn a lot from his strategies because I struggled myself with self-medication. But he's really, I don't like using the word, but he's really woke. Like he's super, super smart.
Yeah.
And I have to listen to some of his podcasts 3 times before I get them.
Yeah.
But I've read his books and I watched him. When I saw him live, my mum got me tickets, and he's a freak. Love him. So
That's
motivational.
Cool. I like him. And finally, what's your favourite quote?
Yeah, I like this one. I like this question. There's a quote, and I actually can't remember who it's by because it's been misquoted a few times.
Okay.
But it goes like this: honour the space between no longer and not yet. So like when you're in a tough moment, when you're in a tough spot and you want to get out of it, sometimes you need to go through this period of not chasing the next thing, because I do that. Like I need something else. When you finish a big race, when you finish UTA 100, just feel it, enjoy it, live that moment for a few weeks. You don't have to go for the next one.
Yeah.
What's next in this fast-paced life? When I was going through these big transitions in my life, it was one of my psychologists that pointed me to the quote, and I had it written up on my wall. And for me, it allowed me to just slow down and not need anything, because I learn a lot in that space of self-reflection. Geez, I just ran 60 Ks. How good was that? Just enjoy it, bath in it. What did I learn from it? Because otherwise, if you go on to the next thing, you don't have time to reflect and learn the lessons. And it's one I always come back to. I journal on it quite often. So that's me.
Awesome. Thanks, mate.
No worries.
And finally, where can people go if they want to follow you?
I don't have any website or Facebook page per se. I've been supposed to set something up for years. I just got literally my personal Facebook and Instagram are pretty much open to the public. My Instagram is probably the easiest, and it's Dan Pricey, EY85. That's it, Dan Pricey 85.
Cool.
Feel free to reach out and shoot me a message.
Awesome. Well, thanks again so much, Dan, for sharing your story, and keep doing what you're doing, and I suppose helping to change those mental health statistics.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we're doing what we do. And thank you for having me, mate. Well done.
Awesome.
On 19. 2
Cheers.
to go.
I can't
Cheers,
even give
mate.
you a. Thanks, mate.